Good afternoon to you. 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Rob Law is with us. He's with the America First Policy Institute. We're going to talk to him about another hurricane now barreling towards the country and Kamala Harris's efforts to act like she can do anything about it. She's politicizing the whole thing as people are fleeing Florida as we speak. Elise Stefanik is here at 4 o'clock. We'll talk to the New York Congresswoman, the House GOP conference chair, about what is happening with our borders especially, and get some reaction to Kamala Harris's many interviews that she suddenly decided to do. Why is she doing that all of a sudden? Why a dramatic campaign shift at this moment? We'll explore. And then Steve Moore is with us at 5 o'clock. He's got a great new book out, The Trump Economic Miracle, a timely release. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yeah, the big media blitz by Kamala Harris this week is already off to an awful start for her. An awful start. You know, you thought, oh, she's going to do 60 Minutes. It's going to be a cakewalk. And it would be if you had a normal person with a functioning brain and an actual record to stand behind. But that's not what you have with Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is being asked very basic questions. Very basic questions by Bill Whitaker of 60 Minutes. These are not challenging questions. They're simple ones. Like, how are you going to improve people's lives? How are you going to lower costs? Why did you let so many illegals in? These are very basic questions. And if you were even a half-talented politician, you'd be able to come up with some sort of answer that gets you through the interview. This woman was struggling to keep her head above water for the entire 60 Minutes interview. And look, 60 Minutes went out of its way to give her an assist in some cases. We've seen some of the footage, the teaser footage of Kamala Harris that was put out, made it really clear that she was completely incompetent and baffled by the questions and how to answer them. Listen, she was asked about Israel. She was asked about Benjamin Netanyahu. Here's what it sounded like when CBS first released the teaser clip.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
What? What the hell was that? That is worse than the kinds of answers they get from Miss Teen USA beauty pageant contestants, where they ask them very basic civics questions. That's worse. That's worse. And that woman wants to be president of the United States. There's a Hurricane Milton, headed towards the Gulf Coast right now in Florida. And we'll talk more about this throughout the show. But do you need any more evidence? Be honest with yourself. Do you need any more evidence that Kamala Harris should be nowhere near power? Do you really want Kamala Harris in charge when things go to crap? When homes are washed away? When people are suffering? She's already functionally in charge. I mean, she's right there with Joe Biden. They share so many things. She's exerted more control than almost any vice president in American history. She's cast more tie-breaking votes than any vice president in American history. She's very involved. And it's been an utter disaster. You have medicine being delivered by donkey in western North Carolina. Civilians undertaking days of rescue efforts before the American military comes anywhere close. And it's not because the American military didn't do it. They wanted to. I guarantee you all of these troops wanted to be in there helping Americans. It was Biden. It was Biden who failed them. It was the governor of North Carolina who failed them. That's what's happening. You want more of that, except more incompetent? Then go with Kamala Harris. It's crazy. All right, so you heard the way she answered that question. As Bill Whitaker says, well, it seems like Netanyahu was not listening. The work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region in Israel that were very much prompted by many things. It means nothing. Here is the way the final edited version of that interview showed up yesterday.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
And that even that is incomprehensible, but that is a million times better than the garbage you heard in the first place. CBS, What kind of stunt is this? They released the clip already. What? Sorry, that cat's out of the bag. I don't know what you think you're doing, but then they released this version yesterday. That's not even how she answered it. And look, let me just talk about editing and how this all works. First of all, for years, they've been giving people like James O'Keefe crap for editing your videos. Your videos are edited. What does that mean, edited? Like we cut it down to a start point and an end point? Is that what you're talking about? All media, especially in post-production, meaning it was recorded at a previous time, edited so that it can be delivered to you. All media is edited. So what does this even mean? But CBS decided to edit it to make it better for Kamala, if you can believe it, which of course you can. And they're going to make excuses like, oh, we would just edit it for time, efficiency. We only have so much time in a broadcast. We wanted to shorten it just to the part we thought was the most salient, and then we wanted to move on from there. They're going to offer some innocent explanation for it. It's garbage. They were doing as many favors as they possibly could for her. And so that was the final product. There's a lot here. Let's see. Let's play some of this Bill Whitaker stuff. And Whitaker, look, as I mentioned before, he asked basic questions. This is the best case scenario, though, for any legacy news outlet to scrutinize Kamala Harris. This is the best case scenario. They'll go kind of gentle. Whitaker, he'll intone some questions. Some of them are good. Some of them are good questions. Not the way I would conduct the interview at all. But Kamala couldn't keep her head above water. She was drowning the whole interview.
There are lots of signs that the American economy is doing very well. Better than most countries, I think. But the American people don't seem to be feeling it. Groceries are 25% higher. And people are blaming you and Joe Biden for that. Are they wrong?
We now have historic low unemployment.
Now, note that the question was binary. Are they wrong? Yes or no? Kamala Harris dances into unrelated talking points.
You and Joe Biden for that. Are they wrong?
We now have historic low unemployment in America among all groups of people.
Not true, actually. Not true. Native-born Americans are losing jobs at record numbers. All of the job, quote, gains have gone to foreign nationals. So record low unemployment among all groups of people is a lie.
We now have an economy that is thriving by all macroeconomic measures.
That's not true either. The cost of everything has skyrocketed. Credit card debt has never been higher. Credit card defaults are rising like crazy. People are poorer now than they were when Joe Biden took office 3.5 years ago based on their ability to spend money. More Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. These are not signs of a healthy economy. In fact, the recent signals we got from the Fed to cut rates were because people were suffering enough that they felt like they could start cutting. So, once again, Kamala Harris is people are thriving macroeconomically. Maybe you, who live in a taxpayer-funded house, maybe you, who are worth, what is she worth? Like $8 million? She's worth a lot of money. I think it's $8 million off the top of my head. And what does her husband do these days? He was an attorney at one point. I think he does nothing now, right? He just beats women. Is that what it is? Yeah, nothing. The Daily Mail has another piece on him today. Just his awful treatment of women. That continues. The awful treatment of women by Doug Emhoff beat continues over at the Daily Mail. And the Kamala campaign has like nothing to say about this. It was a couple days ago that they gave a statement to Semaphore that was buried like 4 items down in a newsletter with a boring headline where they denied the allegations that he had smacked a woman around. And the media, willingly went along with, okay, we'll downplay the scoop of your official denial. Yeah. So Kamala says the economy is doing great.
And to your point, prices are still too high. And I know that, and we need to deal with it, which is why part of my plan, you mentioned groceries. Part of my plan is what we must do to bring down the price of groceries.
Like what?
Harris says she'll press Congress to pass a federal...
I love how they start talking over whatever that was. I assume it was price gouging. We're going to stop all the price gouging. By grocery stores? The places with 1% margins? What price gouging are you talking about? The reason their prices are up is because of you. It's because of you. All that government spending, all that money injected into the economy, printed out, the Federal Reserve underwriting all of that, you did that, Kamala. You were the tie-breaking vote that did that. It wasn't the poor grocery store trying to sell eggs at a loss. It's crazy. Bill Whitaker says, your economic plan is going to add a lot to the deficit. How are you going to pay for it?
You want to expand the child tax credit.
Yes, I do.
You want to give tax breaks to first-time home buyers.
Yes.
And people starting small businesses.
Correct.
But it is estimated by the Nonpartisan Committee for Responsible Federal Budget that your economic plan would add $3 trillion to the federal deficit over the next decade. How are you going to pay for that?
Okay, so the other economists that have reviewed
The other
my
economists.
plan versus my opponent and determined that my economic plan would strengthen America's
The rigged economists that my campaign has hired.
economy, his would weaken it.
But
My plan, Bill, if you don't mind, my plan.
Do you really believe that? You know, you don't have to be an economist to know how it works. Trump was president. How were your economic fortunes during his presidency versus now? What has changed for you?
Is about saying that when you invest in small businesses, you invest in the middle class, and you strengthen America's economy. Small businesses are part of the backbone of America's economy.
But pardon me, Madam Vice.
That's a mindless pablum. That's a bumper sticker. Small businesses are the backbone of the economy. What does that have to do with anything? Bill Whitaker even points out, that's not what I asked you.
President, the question was, how are you going to pay for it?
Well, one of the things is I'm going to make sure that the richest among us who can afford it pay their fair share in taxes. It is not right that teachers and nurses and firefighters are paying a higher tax rate than billionaires and the biggest corporations.
But
I plan on making that fair.
But we're dealing with the
But just, a couple of things to point out here. One of them is that the richest taxpayers pay for almost all of the government, which is true. I think the numbers it's like the top 1% of earners pay for 50% of all the government. That's how much the money is being taken out of them. And yes, you're right. It can be, well, actually, it's a progressive rate, it's a progressive structure, so they pay more as it goes up. But sometimes their effective tax rates are lower. But in terms of real dollars, you're looking at a lot of money that's being paid by the richest taxpayers, one. Two, what happens if you raise taxes on companies, specifically? If you're raising taxes on all of these companies, who ends up paying ultimately? Oh, it's the little guy. Because either the company's got to trim jobs or raise prices on their goods. These are basic, as she says, macroeconomic principles that she's skipping right past. So her plan is to increase costs on us. That's her plan.
real world here.
But the real world includes...
How are you going to get this through Congress?
You know, when you talk quietly with a lot of folks in Congress, they know exactly what I'm talking about because their constituents know exactly what I'm talking about.
When you talk quietly with members of Congress, they know what you're talking about? What does that mean? So that's Kamala Harris acknowledging that members of Congress are lying to you on a routine basis. They don't want to say anything out loud. When they talk quietly with her, they violently agree with her, is her message. Bill Whitaker points out that voters don't even know who she is in many cases.
A quarter of registered voters still say they don't know you. They don't know what makes you tick. And why do you think that is? What's the disconnect?
It's an election, Bill. And I take it seriously that I have to earn everyone's vote. This is an election for President of the United States. No one should be able to take for granted that they can just declare themselves a candidate and automatically receive support. You have to earn it.
Really?
And that's what I intend to do.
Is that how the Democrat primary went? You can't just declare yourself a candidate and automatically get it? Certainly in the primary you can, apparently. You can just be Kamala Harris, not get a single vote in the primary, and now you're the nominee. You can't just do that. Well, how'd you do it then? How'd you get away with that? Bill Whitaker says the reason people say they don't know you is because you don't have any consistent positions. Everything you said you used to believe in, you no longer believe in.
Let me tell you what your critics and the columnists say.
Okay.
They say that the reason so many voters don't know you is that you have changed your position on so many things. You were against fracking, now you're for it. You supported looser immigration policies, now you're tightening them up. You were for Medicare for all, now you're not. So many that people don't truly know what you believe or what you stand for. And I know you've heard that.
I love his delivery, by the way. I just think it's the funniest thing. It's just slow, measured in tone. She's just waiting for him to finish.
In the last 4 years, I have been Vice President of the United States. And I have been traveling our country. And I have been listening to folks and seeking what is possible in terms of common ground. I believe in building consensus. We are a diverse people.
Yeah.
Geographically, regionally, in terms of...
She's a bridge builder, that lady. She really figures out a way to bring us all together. When I think Kamala, I think unity. I think she's the kind of person who can attract everyone. Wait, of course, she's been at the helm of one of the most divisive presidencies in American history, demonizing and arresting their political opponents, sending them to trial, and then throwing away the key when they throw them in prison. That's what she's been up to. The party that has been trying to remove her political opponent from the ballot, using the justice system to try and imprison him. Yeah, the one who wants to arrest you for expressing opinions they disagree with, who wants to censor all of your communications. She's kind of a unity candidate, bringing us all together. Kumbaya, 323.
You recently surprised people when you said that you are a gun owner. And then if someone came into your house...
That was not the first time I've talked about it. That's not the first time I've talked about it.
So what kind of gun do you own, and when and why did you get it?
I have a Glock, and...
What's a Glock?
I've had it for quite some time, and...
How long?
Look, Bill, my background is in law enforcement.
Yeah, she was a cop. She's making that up.
And so there you go.
Have you ever
That's the whole thing. That goes to show you. She knows nothing.
fired it?
Yes.
No, she hasn't.
Of course I have.
She's lying.
At a shooting range? Yes, of course I have.
What is a shooting range? Be more specific. Her team shared it to X later, and she said, "I own a Glock." They lowercase g. They didn't. Glock is a proper name, you idiot. It's the name of a company. She has no idea. Coming up, Rob Law will be with us. We'll talk about Kamala Harris attempting to turn Hurricane Milton into an asset for her struggling campaign. Hey, good afternoon. 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik is here at 4 o'clock, and then economist Steve Moore joins us at 5 o'clock. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. All right, let me give you a quick crash course in some of the events of the last 24 hours. Of course, we are awaiting the horror of, it looks like, of Hurricane Milton, headed for Florida's Gulf Coast right now, set to make landfall tomorrow afternoon based on the current projections. And it is a very aggressive storm to the point that you've got Ron DeSantis urging everybody to get out of the region. There's many zones that are evacuating. I-75 out of Florida is just as jammed as you can imagine. It's a parking lot heading north, trying to get people out of there. The mayor of Tampa was just on CNN yesterday, and she was saying, if you don't heed these evacuation orders, she said, you will die. You will die. Now, I have no idea if she's being overly dramatic just for the effect, probably to some extent, but there's no question that this is a big storm that's going to leave a big impact on Florida. So government officials now offering all those warnings, and lots of Floridians taking heed. In the midst of all of this, Kamala Harris is trying to figure out a way to make it about her. And so apparently she placed some sort of phone call yesterday to somebody in some constellation associated with Ron DeSantis. And DeSantis, in the middle of offering these briefs on what's going on in his state, at first seemed kind of bewildered that there was even a call going on. He's like, I don't even know anything about that. I'm just focused on Florida right now. But then Kamala decided to step up to a microphone on a tarmac yesterday and try and make it a bigger deal, that the governor of Florida wasn't taking some distant phone call from the vice president. What? Here she is.
Governor DeSantis, NBC is reporting Governor DeSantis is ignoring your calls on hurricanes, resources, and help. How does that hurt the situation here?
What a question.
Moments of crisis, if nothing else,
should really be the moment that anyone who calls themselves a leader says they're going to put politics aside and put the people first. People are in desperate need of support right now, and playing political games with this moment in these crisis situations, these are the height of emergency situations, is just utterly irresponsible, and it is selfish, and it is about political gamesmanship instead of doing the job that you took an oath to do, which is to put the people first.
Ron DeSantis, continuing his briefings yesterday, went on the Fox News channel last night, speaking to a big audience with Sean Hannity's show. Sean asked about this, and here's what DeSantis had to say.
And we've been laser focused on leveraging all resources available, including from the federal government. And I've been in touch with both FEMA and the president, as well as marshaling all our state agencies and working to support our local communities. And so for Kamala Harris to try to say that my sole focus on the people of Florida is somehow selfish is delusional. She has no role in this. In fact, she's been vice president for 3.5 years. I've dealt with a number of storms under this administration. She has never contributed anything to any of these efforts. And so what I think is selfish is her trying to blunder into this. No. And here's the thing. She has no role. No, she has no role in this process. I'm in contact with the President of the United States. I'm in contact with FEMA director. I'm obviously managing all our state agencies. We're supporting all our local government. And I will say this. I've had storms under both President Trump and President Biden, and I've worked well with both of them. She's the first one who's trying to politicize the storm, and she's doing that just because of her campaign. She's trying to get some type of an edge. She knows she's doing poorly, and so she's playing these political games. I don't have time for political games.
Yeah, that's DeSantis. Lastly, before we get to our guest here, Joe Biden has weighed in on this today. Reporters were shouting to him, how's Governor DeSantis handling all of this? How's the governor of Florida? Joe Biden declaring outright that he's great, actually.
The governor of Florida has been cooperative. He said he's gotten all that he needs. I talked to him again yesterday, and I said, I said, no, you're doing a great job. It's all being done well. We thank you for it. And I literally gave my personal phone number to call. So I don't know. There was a rough start in some places, but every governor from Florida to North Carolina has been fully cooperative and supportive and acknowledged what this team is doing. And they're doing an incredible job. But we got a lot more to do.
So there you have it. Joe Biden says the only person politicizing this is the useless Kamala Harris. Joining us now, Rob Law, Homeland Security and Immigration Director at the America First Policy Institute, former senior policy advisor to President Trump. Rob, good to have you with us, sir.
Good to be with you today.
It's crazy to see this. You know, she's the vice president of the United States. Why is she interjecting herself into this situation where you could have a lot of lives lost?
Well, I think it's clear that this is a desperate political stunt. And I never thought I would say these words, but I completely agree with President Biden. Governor DeSantis is doing a great job. And I think if you look at it, there is no governor that has a better track record of success in handling hurricanes or other sorts of natural disasters than Governor DeSantis. And this notion that suddenly now Kamala Harris wants to get involved, where was she with the previous hurricane or the one before that? This is not the first hurricane that is about to hit Florida. I mean, think back to just a couple of years ago when the hurricane destroyed the Causeway Bridge separating Fort Myers to Sanibel Island, the only access point to that island. And Governor DeSantis had a temporary bridge reconstructed within days. I mean, it's absolutely incredible what he's been able to do at the state level. And Kamala Harris is only injecting herself now because she knows she's getting killed politically, and she's trying to show a form of leadership that she's failed to execute over the last 3.5 years as vice president.
Rob, what does it tell you that President Biden would come out today and say in so many words that, you know, paid no attention to Kamala Harris? She has nothing to do with this. I'm working great with Governor DeSantis.
Well, I think you maybe have a little bit of a bitterness out of President Biden, who clearly got forced out in a very undemocratic way. He's the sitting president of the United States. He's the one that won all of those delegates, and then he gets forced out because the political insiders say you're getting killed by Trump, and for the party, we're putting politics over anything else, over our democratic republic system of government. And now all of a sudden you look at those exact same polls, and after a slight little bump at the change of the baton, it looks like President Trump is handily going to beat Kamala Harris as well. And so I think there's a little bit of resentment there, and I want his legacy to be defined by the failure of Kamala Harris. I think that's what you have going on there.
Let's talk about FEMA now for a moment, if we can, Rob. I'm concerned about the Biden administration's ability to even respond to Hurricane Milton, given their lackluster response to Hurricane Helene this past week. They were very slow to marshal the resources needed to help Americans in need. What is your assessment right now, Rob, of the federal government's capacity to even do anything to help Americans?
I hear your concerns, and I'm not exactly sure how FEMA got caught flat-footed on Helene, but it seems like they waited too long to deploy resources to Florida, and Florida, by all accounts, had everything largely under control with just state resources. And by the time they got to Florida, the storm was already past them, so they were behind the line. And that's why you saw the devastation that occurred at such an extraordinary level in Tennessee and in North Carolina. But I think you cannot discount the fact that FEMA has basically been converted from an emergency response entity into essentially an ATM for illegal aliens that the Biden-Harris administration's open border policies have allowed in. And so as a result of that, you have FEMA personnel who have been taken off of their emergency mission, been brought to the southern border to help with processing illegal aliens and connecting them with the NGOs who are then using the taxpayer dollars that have come to light in recent days as well. And so when you lose focus on what your mission is and you divert resources away from critically important and life-saving responsibilities like what FEMA's statutory mission is, then you cripple the agency, and even those that are left who want to do the best they can, they don't have the tools and resources that they need, that they should have had from the get-go.
You know, I'm looking once again with horror at the FEMA website right now, and it has their top 3 goals listed out. Goal number 1 is instill equity as a foundation of emergency management. That's FEMA, the emergency agency. Goal number 2, lead whole of community in climate resilience. And then goal number 3 is promote and sustain a ready FEMA and a prepared nation. Don't you think, Rob, that goal 3 should be goal 1?
Well, absolutely. And the other 2 really aren't goals. They're just like woke talking points that don't really mean anything other than you're going to take away your mission, and instead you're going to focus on catering to specific populations as opposed to providing emergency care to those who need it, regardless of their race, their religion, their age, their political creed, et cetera. And again, you see this throughout the federal government where these notions of equity have completely captured what it is that they're supposed to be doing. And it's really a disservice to the American people.
There's a FEMA official called Maggie Jerry who willingly said that her pronouns are she, her, as if nobody could tell, on a recent video clip that they put together. It was a conference they were doing. And she talked about how FEMA's job should not be to focus on making sure that disaster areas are taken care of, no matter who you are, no matter what your skin color is, but instead should be based on racial prejudice. Take a listen.
The shift that we're seeing right now is a shift in emergency management from utilitarian principles where everything is designed for the greatest good for the greatest amount of people to disaster equity. But we have to do more, right?
It's being so we're shifting from the greatest good for the greatest amount of people to focusing on your skin color when we respond?
It's such a vile response. And could you imagine if a Trump administration FEMA official said something along those lines and it was interpreted as, favoring the white community at the expense of minority communities? I mean, that person would be completely canceled from all of society. But apparently it's okay when the left does this. In iteration, you saw this with the loans that they were going to give out to farmers as long as you were not white. And again, you see this across government. And when you operate in this lens, like we are so far removed from, the edict that Martin Luther King Jr. talked about, and we should be utilizing federal resources where they are needed, not creating, artificial bumps for certain populations based off of perceived grievances past or imaginary for the future. It's a real I think, indictment of our times.
It's a big time, and it's just the latest iteration of a Democrat Party that's been defined by this kind of racial prejudice in the 21st century now. It's just grotesque. Rob, thank you very much for your time today and for giving us a sense of everything going on with both Kamala Harris and FEMA and this hurricane coming in. Be well, sir.
Thank you.
That's Rob Law, again, with the America First Policy Institute. Yeah, so Kamala Harris tried to interject herself in all of this. She says, I tried calling DeSantis. I wanted to coordinate the federal response. And anybody who knows anything about this is saying, what? What are you doing? That'd be like Ronald McDonald organizing where to open a McDonald's at. It's like you're just a clown. You're not actually involved in the business side of things. But so Kamala Harris tried to do this. Now I played that clip for you from Joe Biden today. Joe Biden was doing this briefing, and he was asked about, hey, how's Ron DeSantis doing? And he said, he's doing a great job. I've given him my personal number. I wouldn't be surprised if they're swapping anti-Kamala memes over text now. They're like making fun of her or something. Meanwhile, what was Kamala doing during all of this? Well, she was on The View today bragging, making up, actually. She was lying about, I always call governors during hurricanes.
Now, he said this morning, you've never called regarding any of the storms Florida has had since you've been vice president until apparently now, and called it political. What's your response to that?
Well, first of all, I have called and talked with, in the course of this crisis, this most recent crisis, Democrat and Republican governors.
What?
Called, taken the call, answered the call, had a conversation.
In this most recent crisis, can you be a little bit more specific than that? What does that even mean? You mean since Hurricane Helene ran roughshod over the southeast United States, that you decided to call some governors? Oh, thank you. Thank you for your service.
So, obviously, this is not an issue that is about partisanship or politics for certain leaders, but maybe is for others.
Yeah, you were the others in that description. You're the only person who's trying to politicize the whole damn thing. What is wrong with you? Get Governor DeSantis on the phone. Can you imagine what that conversation was like? Okay, but what are you going to say to him? Why would you even talk to him? What would be the point of that? And don't you love how she wants to have it both ways? Her campaign right now is, I have nothing to do with Joe Biden. I have nothing to do with him. I'm a brand new person. I'm not in charge of anything. We need to, quote, turn the page, right? Isn't that her whole campaign? And now she's saying, well, I'm very much in charge of the hurricane response at the federal level. I need to coordinate directly with the governor. Leave it to me. I'm in charge around here. I want the American people to see how in charge I am of everything. And Joe Biden's having private phone calls with Ron DeSantis. The two are getting along splendidly. DeSantis is like, great, he's calling me. I'm talking to Joe. Joe's like, man, the governor's doing great down in Florida. Everything's covered. There's no problems, no politics being played here. And Joe is selling Kamala out. It's only the latest time he's done that. It's only the latest time. You know that press conference that Joe just had this past week when he went to the Brady press briefing room for the first time in his entire presidency? Guess what happened during that very same moment? Kamala was just starting a campaign event at that moment, and he stepped all over it. He ran out to do the White House press briefing right on top of her campaign event. And where did all the networks go? They went to Joe, because he's never in the Brady press briefing room. The president is answering questions? It was like Haley's Comet coming by. Everyone get outside. We got to see this. So he steps all over Kamala's thing. I'm beginning to think that this guy is like secretly MAGA, or maybe not so secretly. Joe Biden was wearing the MAGA hat a couple weeks ago. Remember the guy gave him a MAGA hat on 9/11? And he put it on? I mean, we're this close to Joe Biden saying, let's go, Brandon. Oh, wait, he said that too, remember? Let's go, Brandon. I agree. Yeah, no, I don't. Before you start writing and calling, no, I don't think Joe Biden's actually in a pro-Trump conspiracy theory, but I do think he harbors a lot of resentment towards Kamala Harris. I genuinely think that. And I think there's a part of him who to the extent that he's rubbing his brain cells together and attempting to think this through, he probably is getting a little bit of glee out of stepping on Kamala Harris in this way, which gives me joy too. But, man, we've got a lot to deal with, don't we? Florida is about to get walloped. And the last thing we need to do is let Kamala Harris get involved. Can you imagine how much worse it could be? 352. All right, coming up in just a moment, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, the House Republican Party conference chair, will join us. We're going to talk about the border crisis. That continues, and Kamala Harris's awful media tour that's ahead with Elise Stefanik.